All right, we're live again, and we are going to read chapter 12 from Summer with the Marine. I am Ellie Hall. If for some reason you're catching this, chapter 12, there are 11 more chapters, and then one more to go after this, and a minute for the long haul, we're going to do this. So please enjoy, and I hope you read along. Okay, here we go. Chapter 12, Ford. Ford was going to tell Eisley about the massive changes in his life, but until that moment, he wasn't sure how. As the wind continued to howl outside, the fact that they were in the middle of a storm and the truth had come out was fitting. All things considered, she took it well, but she didn't answer his question about accepting help and letting him into her life. Instead, she said, "I look like I was lost at sea for the last 10 years and just washed up on your doorstep. It's silly to ask if you have anything that might fit me, but I'd appreciate something dry. I'll see what I can do." The idea of her wearing his clothing brought an old memory to life. She'd always nab one of his sweatshirts and wear it until he didn't have any clean clothes left, and he demanded it back. Fortunately, Mrs. Higgins would wash it before Eisley returned it. Growing up with his dad and brothers, household chores weren't a priority. His attention to duty and detail had changed when he entered the Marines and got away from home. Unfortunately, the sad state of his family's affairs only got worse. Ford checked on Coco and then grabbed one of his oversized t-shirts for Eisley to change into. The vision of her in it stirred something inside him. "Thanks," she said when he met her in the living room. "The bathroom is down that way if you'd like to change." As she turned, he caught her bring the shirt to her nose and breathed deep. The affectionate gesture made him smile. In fact, he was still grinning when she returned, practically swimming in the shirt, it was so big on her. He chuckled. "It's not my fault you're a giant. Where are my manners? Are you thirsty? Hungry?" he asked. She nodded. He showed her to the kitchen with modern appliances and custom woodwork. "I had figured you'd ring a bell and a butler would appear." Again he laughed, and he imagined that what sound wasn't common in the mansion when his grandfather lived there. From what he'd gathered, the old man was rather unpleasant and was codgery, as someone in town had said. Still, he didn't like the idea of the old man living and dying alone. Ford fixed them both carbonated water and lemon. Glass containers filled with chopped fruits and vegetables, organized by color, lined the refrigerator shelves. There were also yogurt, string cheese, and other kid-friendly but healthy foods. "I can offer you raspberries, melon, cucumber." Eisley laughed. "Wow, no butler, but your cook really keeps things organized." Heat rose to Ford's cheeks. "Actually, that's me. You can take me out of active duty, but you can't take the Marine out of me," he mumbled. Or something like that. He picked up a parenting book and set it in front of Eisley. "I have no idea what I'm doing. The book said to offer an assortment of healthy fruits, vegetables, and protein early and often, so that's what I'm trying. I remember the fridge at your house when you were younger. Hot dogs, ketchup, and milk. Somehow you grew up into..." Her eyes scanned him up and down. "This is the result of 3 squares a day starting in basic training." "Well, you didn't do too bad for yourself, soldier." She waggled her eyebrows. Ford smirked. "You turned out mighty fine yourself, Eisley." "You think so?" He reached for her waist. "I do think so." He dipped his head to meet her lips, and she yelped, then started laughing. His face fell in alarm, then he remembered her ticklish spot. He tickled her some more before she lifted onto her toes and threw her arms around his neck. He hoisted her onto the counter so they were eye level. Then they kissed and kissed and kissed. With Eisley, time didn't matter. They had the rest of their lives, he hoped. Then the hope started to falter. First it flickered like the lights above in the kitchen as the power threatened to go out due to the storm. Then it dimmed a bit. Would she want to have a family? He hardly knew how to take care of a 2-year-old, but was learning. Would she be willing to do that, especially since she wasn't the biological mother? Eisley mentioned she needed to grow up, but did that mean apart from him? He didn't dare ask because that meant he'd have to break the kiss, and at least for the time, the power was still on. She was still there. But as their lips mashed together, thoughts repeatedly swirled in his mind. Could they make a life together? Could she deal with some of the fallout from the war that he still struggled with from time to time? The room went dark. Eisley's eyes were closed, so she must not have noticed as her hands clutched his jaw, holding him in place, kissing him deeply. But he sensed the light changed behind his lids. In the darkness, as so often happened, the big fears emerged. Would he be able to handle being a dad and figuring out a relationship? He told himself that until Coco was grown, he'd focus solely on her and give her the life she deserved. What he hadn't been able to give her, his first love, or Coco's mother. He owed his daughter and the world and worried that there wasn't room in it for Eisley, too. As though she sensed his troublesome thoughts, they parted. Ford certainly didn't want her to think he was rejecting her because that wasn't his intention. He just didn't know what he was doing. Granted, children didn't officially come with instruction manuals, but there were plenty of parenting books. He'd have to go to the bookstore in town and see if there was one titled "How to be the Best Possible Father to a Kid You Didn't Know You Had and Renew a Relationship You Didn't Think You'd Ever Get Back." Ford needed time, space to think, to figure things out. However, like the wind and rain outside, life just kept on raging. He went to check on Coco, and then they returned to the living room. In the meantime, the generator had kicked on. Ford clicked on the news to get an update on the storm. Should downgrade by mid-morning. You should call your mom and let her know you're safe and that you're staying the night. Her eyes widened. No, I should get going. Text her, he commanded. Under no circumstances was she going back out in that mess. Eisley sighed and did as he ordered. He grabbed a throw blanket from a chest behind the couch and draped it over her shoulders. He took one for himself, then grabbed 2 pouches of fish crackers from the kitchen. She smirked. Now I know why you had the kids' bug spray. Always best to be prepared. Tell me about her, Eisley said, as she nestled into the pillows on the couch. How about in the morning you meet her and she can tell you all about her yourself. Sorry. It's a tongue twister for some reason. How about in the morning you meet her and she can tell you all about herself. All 39 words. Are you counting how many words she knows? I just want to make sure she's on track developmentally. Eisley got up from her spot and then rested in the crook of Ford's arm. Memories flooded back of the 2 of them lying in the field after football games and gazing at the stars in much the same position. Make sure you keep Daddy and Drill Sergeant balanced, he chuckled, knowing he leaned heavily on his training, but that was all he knew. Maybe a mommy could help me do that, he hinted. He meant it playfully, but the moment the words were out of his mouth, Eisley stiffened. Ford, we still have our own lives to sort out before we start to think about making one together. Something sharp filled his throat and drove itself down into his chest, but she didn't move from his arms. During his time overseas, Ford had come to know God, to talk to him, to listen. He prayed then with gratitude for the time he and Eisley had together, because that in itself was a gift. As much as he talked about fate and destiny, he knew that ultimately it was all in the Lord's hands. At that, he drifted to sleep with the woman he loved nestled safely in his arms. Instead of waking to the sound of wind and rain, a pleasant babbling brought Ford's eyes open the next morning. On the baby monitor screen, Coco sat up in her crib, clapping her hands together and singing. A smile lifted Ford's cheeks. He tried not to disturb Eisley, who was still in his arms. His grin doubled. Ford tended to his daughter, but by the time they made it back downstairs, Eisley was awake and had several bowls and ingredients spread across the kitchen counter. Pancakes, anyone? She asked, as she flipped one on the griddle. I found your whole grain flapjack mix and figured if we add some fruit, we can call it a balanced breakfast. She was teasing, but seeing her making herself at home in his kitchen brought warmth unlike he'd ever known, especially not growing up with a stable home, where Mom made pancakes and Dad did the dishes, or any variation of that. Coco smiled. She had the kind of grin that could light up a room. Eisley crossed the kitchen and said, Hi, I'm Eisley. I'm your daddy's friend. Part of him wanted to hear the word girl in front of friend, but the other part told him to stand down and focus on his priorities. I am Coco. Her voice was small and squeaky. Coco, Eisley asked. I love your name. It's very nice to meet you, Coco. Eisley took the little girl's hand and shook it, but Coco pushed from her father's arms and reached hers around Eisley's neck. She hugged Coco back. Eisley's eyes widened in surprise, then dipped closed as though enjoying the embrace. Ford dashed to the griddle to keep the pancakes from burning. I have to warn you, Coco gives really good hugs. I sometimes call her Coco the koala. It might make you want to stick around. Koala, the little girl repeated. The 3 of them had breakfast as the last of the rain and clouds moved out to sea. They chatted and played a game with the blueberries so Coco would eat them. Afterward, Eisley called to check on her mother to make sure she was okay. Apparently, the King and Queen of Concordia just had a baby, she reported after they got off the phone. Congrats to them, but how's your mom? She loves babies, so I think she's doing just fine. Eisley set her phone aside. I think she'll really like this koala. Eisley scooped up the little girl so they could wash her hands. Eisley and Coco got along perfectly. It was more than he could ask for or expect. For the rest of the morning, she played with the little girl, read her stories, and they sang songs together. Eisley's clothing has dried, so she finally changed out of his shirt, though he did like the idea of her wearing it. Ford took a few minutes to assess for damage around the property. By the afternoon, the sun was shining, so they walked along the beach looking for treasures. Oftentimes, after a storm, interesting things washed up. As the day... Oh, thank you. Hi. I just saw the comment. As the day faded, he realized he'd already found the greatest treasures, Eisley and Coco. They had dinner, and then Ford put Coco to bed. He was tired from the late night and long day, which didn't help put his thoughts in order. Eisley waited downstairs, pacing by the windows that opened to the ocean. We should talk, she said. Is everything okay? He sat down because her tone indicated it was something serious. She stopped abruptly. When I got back here, I got annoyed with my mother. She's always been so meddlesome. I told myself that if I ever have kids, I'll take a hands-off approach. Let them figure things out. She shook her head. I was mistaken. Looking back, and still to this day, my mother has only meant well. She's been nothing but helpful, a guide, so generous and patient. Ford wasn't sure where the conversation was going. She's a special lady. Listen, I don't know what kind of lady I am, never mind what kind of mother I'd be, but I know now it won't be hands-off, not at all. Sure, I'll let them figure out some things, but after spending the day with Coco, I have so many questions. But one thing I know for sure is that I'm not ready for this. Eisley, no one is. Do you think I was? She opened and closed her mouth. Her shoulders rose and fell. I just don't know, Ford. I need some time to think. She started toward the door. He needed time too, but before she left, he reached for her arm. She spun into his, and then he planted a kiss on her forehead. I understand, but let's not let another decade pass. A small, sad smile formed on her lips, and she fled into the coming night. Ford's limbs felt heavy, and a scratchy sensation filled his throat. He'd left Eisley once, and that time she was leaving him. He forced himself to remain rooted and not run after her, because the truth was, he needed the time too. He was brand new at being a dad and had to get that down a bit better before he added to their family. But the hope in his chest, the one that carried him through the horrors of war, blazed on. Okay, one more chapter to go. So if you're joining me now, I am going chapter by chapter. So, and I am 100% in the One More Chapter Club. So we are going to read the last chapter now, and they're all saved under my IGTV. I have them saved as a series. So if you've missed any of the previous chapters, tuning in late, you'll find them there. But I am going to go live one more time to read chapter 13, the conclusion. I can't remember if I wrote an epilogue for this book or not, but it's the first in a series, so there are 5 more to go. But anyway, so I'm going to save this, download it, and then I will be right back. And so look for my live if you're joining me live, and if you're not joining me live, just hop into the series collection in my IGTV stories. I need a sip of water.